Hey yo everyone, and welcome to the Kanzuki Estate. Best theme. Well, second best theme. This is Rillian, and we're going into the Wednesday segment of the 2MK group. This content should be rebroadcasting on the 2MK main channel with my full permission, of course. Sandbag Casuals is one of our sillier segments in which we go through matches where the player in question, in this case me, refused to grind out some bad habits or do enough practice on particular things. And the results of that, this is different from playing to learn, in which you are doing suboptimal things on purpose. So let's start with a horrendous match I had against a Mika player that will easily demonstrate what happens when you don't work out how to get out of throw pressure on your character. Despite the fact that I actually have command throw training partners, it doesn't really come up that often, honestly, because it's relatively hard to start pressure on me for those players. However, not everyone has this problem. You'll note that this is a level 41 Rainbow Mika. And one of the most important things to learn when you're figuring out whether or not you're doing well is to check the level of your opponent. There's a long explanation about statistics and the mountain that is the Street Fighter ranking system that maybe I'll go into after this round, but just suffice to say that the level of your opponent is pretty important. As you can see, I don't have a whole lot of problems with the matchup itself. I can see where to move from, I can see some of the hits that should happen, but once I'm down, and this is not a Mika Blender problem, this is a my playstyle problem. Because as you can see, she ends up putting me back in neutral fairly often. But now she's got resources, and the damage to make a lot of bad things happen. That jump was actually just too slow. So once again, we're back at neutral, so nothing horrible is happening yet. And I can basically handle them in the neutral situation. To a point. I was expecting a low. But you'll see once again, when they've actually gotten me down and bothered to continue, this sort of thing happens. So it's a short explanation, but let's look at that last Mika combo as the important part of this. Most Mika don't know that combo. Most Mika that do know that combo can't do that combo. You could ask, why is this player still in bronze? They could play a lot of casuals and therefore leveled up that way, and that's a good way to check if you happen to be playing casuals yourself. There's a good chance that you can use your opponent's level with the character to tell you something about them. But the ranking system of Street Fighter is basically a pyramid, or a mountain, depending on how you want to look at it. If everyone at the bronze level is the same skill, even if they are technically approximately the same skill as whoever's above them in silver, they're not necessarily going to get out of bronze, because in order to rise in the ranks, you have to have a approximately 60% win rate if you want to go up quickly. But if everyone on your level is actually on your level, it really doesn't matter what tier you're in. You will win 50% of the time and you won't go up in rank. All this means is that until we get an influx of new players, things may be set for quite a while. So here's a good contrast. Against Urian, I don't have a lot of blatant holes in my game where I needed to train something to do better. Even this sequence in which I'm apparently getting pummeled really isn't about, oh, I'm not doing things I should be doing. It's more about the fact that the Urian player is doing things they shouldn't be doing and I'm not responding to that.
Round 2.
Because they're in silver, I expect certain things, but then I decided I'll just not do that. Let's see what happens if I change the way I feel. Because they are twitchy enough to hit buttons and try to do that at times where it's easy enough to see it. And Urian isn't particularly good at punishing Colleen's V-skill, which gives me at least a bit of spacing for getting those things off. They could throw, they could move a little bit differently, but at the moment, they seem pretty focused on doing what they're good at or used to doing. I could have just countered again, for example, instead of doing any of that. The jump was also unexpected because it just didn't seem like something one would do. But, hey, if they want to move that much and attack that much, then it's up to me to figure out which buttons to counter. But this entire sequence showed a lot of promise in that they moved differently. But differently wasn't necessarily enough. They're still relatively over-reliant on using long buttons, as you can see, and spacing themselves to take advantage of things that basically only Urian can do. So making a comeback isn't necessarily hard. Yet this Urian player is level 37. Is that because Urian is strong now? Possibly. It can be said that they have the Urian playstyle that is generally found to be more annoying than most. Namely of using their EX tackle and occasionally throwing fireballs. But to Colleen, EX tackle is not specifically unreactable. So why is this person level 37? They're technically lower level than the Mika, but we didn't see a lot of really spectacular Urian style things from them. We saw strengths that Urian currently has and may lose. So you could expect to see some changes in their playstyle, or you could expect to see them possibly leave the character, but
Don't worry.
I'll hope that they're actually fairly dedicated to it. Also, I think I fought them before. A while ago though.
Round 1. Fight.
And that made me think that they haven't necessarily moved in rank since the last time I fought them, if it was indeed them. But that doesn't mean that, oh, they're terrible. It just means that everyone else they fight is around the same skill level. Or they occasionally find someone who is not pushing back things, or maybe they just don't play ranked, I suppose. But I can say I know how they fight at this point. And the question is just, how much can I exploit this way that they fight?
Round 2.
But because I haven't
Fight.
learned most of Colleen's pressure at a high enough level, I'm left doing things like that. When I really should just be dropping hail on his head because he doesn't have a lot of good wake-ups to deal with it. Also, I haven't grinded that combo enough to make sure that that doesn't happen, because that is in fact plus enough that I should be able to do that. And I lose out because I didn't practice it enough to do that consistently. So there was a little sandbagging in this, at least at that point. I literally remember thinking at that moment that they did a good job of choosing Urien as Colleen's opponent in the Colleen trailer, because a lot of it is about making him look less dangerous, and she's really good at making him look less dangerous. But as you can see, using EX Tackle as a solution to pretty much everything doesn't work on her very well.
Fight.
So you watch me here a little bit and try to bait the situation where he'll do it, because the other option is the same crouching medium kick that is now +2 and therefore an easy go-to button. I could have just done it again. But she's not a character you can really play footsies with. And she's not a character you can bully without leaving yourself open way too much. And another thing that comes up in being bronze that can be very discouraging is when you get defeated by things that work only because they don't make a lot of sense, is there heavy risks. But it's okay to take heavy risks. It's just that you can't take them too often. If you get a random sense to, I should do this move here even though this is probably the least safe and worst move in my arsenal, you may get to defeat someone based on this purely because your feeling was right, your hunch was right, they weren't expecting it, and down they went. However, you can't keep that up for a whole round, because unless you continually have the same hunch, chances are they're going to adapt to you. I don't think that if I played a lot of sets with that Urien that I would have had too much trouble doing it. I'm still working out with the concept of this matchup. So in a sense, this is also sandbagging. I did have a different match with a different Zangief, but it's not in this set, because at that point I was playing to learn based on the realization that, oh, I don't really ever fight Zangief on Colleen, so I should probably do some of that. Therefore it will be in the next play to learn segment instead. This, however, is once again a matter of
Round 1.
what am I not ready for because I haven't practiced enough. And since you can't practice for every opponent and every matchup, you have to recognize this, and the important thing being, it's sandbagging somewhat if you don't try to make up for your own weakness. If you know you haven't practiced something and you still try it. That's not the same as playing to learn, because playing to learn you are dealing with unfamiliar situations, you are coming up with new solutions on the fly. This is just failing at things you should have practiced harder. And technically, it's not a really good thing to do. Philosophically, you could say that there's a certain sequence you should go through when it comes to this game. Play casuals until you realize you don't know a matchup, or haven't practiced something enough. Go to training mode and grind against a bot that will help you with that thing. And solve that way. And finally, when you realize that you've gone through casuals, you haven't met anything you don't understand, you haven't had any frustrating matches, you just basically beat everyone, then you can return to ranked and rank up until you stop being on a basically decent winning streak. Or you could have bad luck, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about what conceptually should work. If you've gotten better to the point where casuals is easy, then go to ranked, which will raise your rank, and then come back to casuals. And casuals should no longer be easy because you'd now be fighting higher level opponents, or so we hope. I often get to skip this step because, as I mentioned in another video, if I'm at a very specific point value, somewhere around 2300, I end up getting matched against people right up to the top of silver, and I don't really feel the need to do that. I can just fight those people. But when I'm here, which I dropped back down to partially by chance and partially because of Colleen and partially because of the intention to do these segments, it means that in casuals I'm going to meet people who are within bronze and doing very specific things. So, right now the idea is that I should go through the matchup mentally to figure out what I can do, what I haven't been doing correctly, and what I can change about that. It is considered sandbagging, not specifically playing to learn, when you are trying to use things in the match that you are fairly sure will work, but aren't good at. And that was a very good version of a taunt. I think we should probably come up with a name for that. Either way, I'm not good at facing Hailstorm against Zangief specifically, because Zangief has a lot of ways out of dealing with it at close range, and he doesn't have to deal with it at long range. If anything, Zangief players are used to holding the fort down and not doing a bunch of damage that way. Therefore, the best thing I can do is try to rely on it as much as I can. And here's the other option. If Zangief is walking forward, he can be hit by Parabellum as a footsie tool in neutral. And this is something that I haven't practiced basically at all. So, let's see what we can get. Lure him into moving, control space, and hit the Parabellum. That obviously didn't work out well, but it wasn't terrible. Unfortunately, this does no damage anymore, and therefore it didn't make any sense to do the ender. Easier to get a mix-up of some kind.
Colleen wins.
The easy answer would have been to jump twice and hope that he either activated UV trigger or went straight for super. So, what is the takeaway of all this? It's part of the emotional flow of playing this game. Can I beat this person? I don't know. Because what I'm trying to do, or what I should be doing, what I know that I should be doing, and what I am actually doing, are not necessarily the same thing. This can be very frustrating for a lot of players, especially players who have been playing these games for a long time, coming into a new game. If they just don't have the time to grind out the way they used to when they were younger or more into the previous game or anything like that, or just getting used to the new game and missing the results of all their grinding from the old game, it can be a very frustrating experience. That's why you shouldn't commit too much to it. That's why you have to perceive it as the equivalent of sandbagging. Because if you wanted to win that much, you would go grind the same way you did whatever grinding last game. Just sit through it all and lose the same way you did last game. The difference being, as you're about to see, that if you didn't have the feeling that you were good in the other game or older game similarly, then there is no feeling of, oh, I suck so much now, I should be better at this. You wouldn't have felt I should be better at this. You would have celebrated every new combo, every new skill you got. But now, you have to relearn those skills, and it can be frustrating. That, for example, was just itself. I'm sure everyone has at some point experienced that moment. But that moment isn't really something to blame yourself for. It's just a thing that can happen because of the sheer unexpectedness of the tactic. Now if they keep on trying to do it, then maybe you would have to complain about feeling about it. But the first time? No, that's just random. Another thing I haven't found out properly, and is actually a big problem, is that I know I'm supposed to end that combo with the trigger, and I just don't. Or I hit wrong somehow because the timing is a bit different than most things.
Zangief wins.
So if you're not playing at your optimal, but you know what your optimal is, the only real answer is to grind more. Grind with your friends in battle lounges. If you don't have friends to grind with, or you need a specific thing, head over to the site, grab a bot, input that, or input whatever version of it you can input for your purposes, and do that. And when you get tired of that and feel like you've done enough grinding, push on forward again. Because you can lose to anyone if the thing that is required for the matchup is not something you've practiced. When one talks about not knowing the matchup or not being familiar with the matchup, that is both the matter of knowing what to do and understanding that you can't necessarily get it done. And because as the game expands, this will become more and more relevant. New characters will appear with new playstyles and new matchup knowledge that you have to learn. But if you didn't, let's say you didn't buy the character and they're not played online that often, there's no way for you to get that particular grind unless you can create some facsimile to work. This is a good example. This Alex is not really that specifically good or specifically bad. They have a very specific sequence, but you can't judge the sequence as good or bad in itself. I should have gone for the third one. But if you haven't practiced dealing with Alex, even things like the muscle memory for reactions to avoid certain things he does can become a problem. And as mentioned in my earlier segment this week, I really have some problems with that combo. So, you can see where you drop your execution, and you can see where you failed a particular thing. And if you choose to keep playing, that's fine, as long as you do so with the understanding and expectation that you're going to lose because you didn't grind enough, or because you overestimated your ability on something. But as you can see, depending on how the opponent moves and your own awareness, if you're lucky and all your spacing and all your buttons work, and you have the right dash under, whatever else, it's not that hard to actually play through the match in the regular way.
Final round.
But it can be extremely frustrating to know that you can do better and just not. That, for example, is supposed to be a jump. The jump solves all the problems. But there are very few characters for whom that sort of move is responded to by jumping. The only other character who has a move particularly similar is Bison, and you don't want to jump against Bison's version of that. And that was simply not knowing the right counter to hit there. Even though fully expecting the response that came the third time, I technically don't know what hit that is. I should go find out, but I can also say, well, the next time I happen to meet an Alex who responds by doing his chop, I'm probably going to lose the same way. This is particularly important for those of us who use fight money to buy characters and therefore don't buy every character. Which is in itself, there's no excuse for that, and complaining too. You can't complain that you want to be really good at Street Fighter and not buy DLC characters. At least not the ones that give you trouble. Now, the reason I have basically no experience in this matchup is that Chun is my main, and Chun has like no problems with Alex. I know this matchup in and out with Chun-Li, but not with Colleen. The questions of how fast does he cross the screen, how easy is it to use counters on him, at what spacing should I throw out, B-skill, I know none of these things. And they've easily seen through this, but that's important. A player does not have to be that